The agricultural industry is probably not where you would expect to find railway engineers, but in 1789, a young man named Robert Ransom set up a shop that would go on to make a mark on railway history that would be felt all around the world. Setting up shop in Norwich, the company Ransomes and Jeffries made all sorts of agricultural tools, from ploughs to scythes. If it was metal, it made it. Robert retired with several notable patents under his belt, including one for chilled cast iron, a new method which made the iron stronger. The year he retired, 1825, was notable, as he stepped down, the first public railway stepped up. The success of the Stockton and Darlington may have been the inspiration for his sons James and Robert to look more at railway production. In 1836, local chemist Charles May joined the team. Having a chemist on board meant that they could experiment with iron casting, creating the best balance and the strongest raw product. Realising that their new railway venture was going to outgrow their current works, they opened up a 10-acre site just off the River Orwell near to the Ipswich dockyard, and it took 8 years to move from one site to the other. But the new site was as modern as 1849 could get, and it would satisfy both the rural and now the urban market. The factory didn't focus on locomotives straight away. Instead, they focused on making chairs and tree nails. Railway chairs, in the most basic sense, act as the anchor holding the rail, while a mix of bolts, called keys, and tree nails were hammered through purpose-built holes in the chair, securing it to the sleeper. Tree nails were another one of the company's specialities. Although they were mostly made of wood, iron was used as extra strength. 32 million tree nails and 5 million chairs later, the Ransom family branched into crossings and points. In 1862, an engineer offered his service to the foundry. Richard Rapier was young, only 26, but his education was an engineer's dream. He worked as an apprentice with Robert Stephenson and Company in Newcastle, and after 7 years he was newly qualified and ready to take over the railway department, which had grown and accounted for over 70% of the company's turnover. Rapier wanted to be more exclusive with the railway products, and when the agricultural side was beginning to pick up again, it was decided to split the company. One side would be exclusive to farming, while the other would be exclusive to railways. To further separate the two departments, Ransomes and Rapier moved their works directly across from their parent foundry. The site was perfect and had room to expand. As the new divisional company was settling in, on the other side of the globe in China, events were unfolding that would change the company. Thanks to Western traders settling in China, large ports were established to allow more trade to flow. However, getting the freight to the port was still an issue. In 1865, engineer Henry Robinson proposed a railway from the now major port of Shanghai to Wusong. The terrain was unusual, as the route chosen intersected land that was used as grave sites. The locals couldn't move their loved ones, and the engineer was sympathetic to the families, so trestles were allowed so the locals could access the land. Railway company Jardine Matheson also got involved and helped negotiate the logistics, and in 1873 the route and the method was agreed. It just needed a foundry to help build it. News of the dilemma spread back to the UK and to the ears of Richard Rapier. Richard was desperate to hit into the foreign market and was only too happy to provide all the metal components the railway required. This would also include 2 locomotives to run it. The 2-foot gauge 040 saddle tank engines were said to be powerful enough to take several tons at a reasonable 20 miles an hour, but the engines were small enough to fit in standard packing crates. The engine took a year to build. Jardines Matheson would handle the metal in Shanghai and the construction, but Ransomes and Rapier would deliver the engines and the rolling stock. The engine was named Pioneer, and it proved a great attraction, with hundreds of locals coming to see this new oddity. Other engines were soon quick to follow Pioneer, and soon was joined by Celestial Empire. This engine was much larger and with it much more powerful. Within a year, tank engine Flowerytown had joined the fleet, and by the December 1876, Viceroy had also been ordered. This was a much larger engine at over 11 tons, but it was successfully tested and was working by 1877. But it wasn't just China that was benefiting. The Cape Government Railway had heard of the company and put in an order for its own engine. Only this time, Mercury, as they called it, was a vertical boiler rather than the traditional design. Unlike the Chinese railway, not much was known about the engine's use, but whatever it did, it must have been worthwhile, as 2 more were ordered in its wake. The next engines would be sent west to the island of Hawaii. Winane used the same plans as Pioneer, and engines 10 and 11 would soon follow. The 3 locos were small, but were ideal to convey sugarcane to the mills. The narrow-gauge engines suited the sugar plantations well, and its success spurred other plantations to bring in other engines, and with Ransomes and Rapier were only too happy to fill in the orders. Travelling back east, 4 more locomotives were ordered for the Dahlia State Railway in Bengal. Gladstone, Hartington, Ripon and Eden were sent in 1881, but unlike the others, a substantial rebuild was required when they arrived. This also included the loss of their names at some point. Number 19 Perak was ordered for its namesake railway in Malaya. In addition to the engine, Ransomes agreed to supply the entire railway, not only the rails, which were deported, but turntables, wagons, a 10-ton crane, even the station fittings to help get the railway working. This undertaking overtook much of the foundry's production, but in 1881, the last vertical steam engine was made. Number 20, Angelica, was the only order for the Quintas Zara and Company. The company were agents to the sugar plantations, and the likelihood Angelica was posted to one, although it's not certain. And the very last steam loco, a tram named simply 23, rolled off the line in 1904. The company would abandon locomotive building after this point. Engines were being developed in their own countries, and the new narrow-gauge locomotives were on a bit of a stagnant. In 1932, the company revived its programme, not with steam, but with diesel. It was decided that rather than bespoke to the consumer, the goal was to standardise the design into 4 models. Almost 100 diesels were sold before the start of the Second World War, and again to a worldwide market. Ransomes and Rapier went on to supply the railway with narrow-gauge engines and rolling stock, including moving on to large cranes, with many still surviving today. After the war, fortunes didn't seem to look so rosy for the company, and it was sold in 1958. Like many, it was not immune to the changing trends in industry and the move from rail to road vehicles. Instead of using narrow-gauge railway engines, forklifts and small loaders would take their places. By 1987, the company was forced to close, citing lack of work. Although the company was consigned to history, a few locomotives do survive. Because of their small size, they are a restoration dream. Steam cranes, locomotives, diesels and carriages still run on the rails and are regularly displayed. They really are a firm favourite across rail fanatics, and not only in the UK, but around the world as well.